Welcome this morning, everyone. We left off about halfway through the book or the chapter in Psalm 62 last time. Okay. Hopefully that's better. All right. So yes, we're in Psalm 62. Last time we made it through verse 6. So we'll just pick up again in verse 7 here this morning, and if time allows, we'll go on into 63. But we remember just briefly that this was a song that was written to Jeduthun, one of the chief musicians. And so this would have been a song set to music. And it's a psalm that talks about waiting on God. Truly my soul waits upon God. From him comes my salvation. And we talked in verses 2 and 6 about this progressive understanding. You know, in verse 2, he says, he only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be greatly moved. And then in verse 6, we saw that word greatly is gone from David's language. And now he's just saying, I'm not going to be moved, because he's coming to the fuller understanding that God is sovereign and God will not allow things to happen in his life that are not a part of God's plan. And one of my favorite parts of the study last time was in verse 5, where we looked at that word expectation or hope. And we learned how that word, the first time that word in the Hebrew is used, it was translated as a rope or a cord. And it was that rope and cord that Rahab threw out of her wall as a sign that she was trusting in the God of Israel to preserve her and her family. So that's where we left off. Let's start at verse 7. So he says, in God is my salvation and my glory. The rock of my strength and my refuge is in God. And not a whole lot to comment on this other than, you know, we have this repeated theme of salvation. God is my salvation. We could also use the word deliverance, and reminding that we will face problems in life, we will face troubles, and God is the answer to those problems and those troubles. And then glory. God is my glory. You think of, I don't know if anyone ever did this, but if you think of a childhood hero that you had, you know, when you were young, if there was someone, or maybe maybe you were into politics and there was a politician that was your, like, oh, I really like this person, or a sports person, and you really like that sports figure. Maybe it was your dad or your mom, or a teacher, or a coach or something. But just somebody that you really looked up to and could count on. That was your glory, if you will. And David is saying, God's my glory. He's the one I aspire to be like. He is the one that I am glorying in. And so then in verse 8, he can say this: trust in him at all times. Trust in him at all times. Ye people, pour out your hearts before him. God is a refuge for us. Selah. And I like how he expands to not just talking about himself, but he's including everybody now. He's not just my refuge. He's not just my hero, if you will. He's for all of us. You people, he says, pour out your hearts before him. He's a refuge for us. And just to to tell them, trust in him at all times. There are times where it doesn't seem logical to trust in God. You know, the path that he's leading us on, or what we see with our eyes and hear with our ears, does not sound like it should turn out very good for us. And those are the times especially when we need to remember to trust God, because his ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are greater than our thoughts. And I can't help but think of this passage in Job, chapter 23. Turn to Job 23. All right, so let's begin at verse 8. And here you can kind of see Job expressing both the human reasoning and the feelings associated with that, and then his statement of like faith, like, but here's what I actually know to be true. So in verse 8 he says, behold, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. On the left hand where he doth work, but I cannot behold him. He hideth himself on the right hand, that I cannot see him. So those are the human thoughts. You know, whatever I do, wherever I look, I can't see God at work. I don't know what's going on in my life. But then verse 10, but he knoweth the way that I take, and when he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. My foot hath held his steps, his way have I kept and not declined. And it goes on there, but Job kind of understood that. He knew that in the moment there was no possible way his human eyes and understanding could comprehend what was going on. As best he could. He tried and he tried and he tried to reason it through, and he tried to argue his innocence to his friends, that I'd done nothing wrong, and he just couldn't make sense of his situation. But he knew that God had it under control. God knows where I'm at. So trust in him at all times. Trust in him at all times. One other quick reference, turning forward in Psalm 103. Psalm 103, verse 14. It says, for he, that's God, knoweth our frame. He remembereth that we are dust. God knows where we're at, and he knows what we are. He knows what we can handle, and we have to trust him. It's pretty clear that we don't really know ourselves all that well. How many people in life, you know, don't know their limits or whatnot, and they push themselves or don't push themselves hard enough. It could be one or the other. And God knows exactly who we are. He knows exactly how much we can handle, and he takes us through. He supplies us. So trust in him at all times. Pour out your heart before him. And I just love that terminology there, to pour out your heart before him. It's like you spill a cup on the table, you're not getting that water back in the cup. Unless you do some fancy squeegeeing and different things. But no, you're pouring out your heart. You're spilling out your inner being to the Lord to let him bring the comfort and the understanding. So, verse 9. Surely men of low degree are vanity, and men of high degree are a lie, to be laid in the balance. They are altogether lighter than vanity. Now, this verse is a little bit confusing at first, because it seems like he's saying, the proud and the humble are both worthless. There's no benefit to either. And in a sense, that's kind of what he's saying, but there's a little more to it than that. Some people think that if you bring yourself into great humility, like in earthly speaking, like you have nothing, you get rid of all your wealth, you get rid of your pleasures and your earthly desires, and you just bring yourself to this state of great humility, and then you think that that's going to be what brings you close to God. Well, that's not true. That is not what knowing God consists of. And then there's others who find that, I'm just going to find my life's fulfillment in riches and in all the best things of life, and they find no satisfaction there either. And what he's saying is they're both going to be laid in the balance. They're both going to be tried according to the same standard, which is a standard that is measured against God himself. God is the standard. And just a cross-reference here to Isaiah 2, verse 9. Isaiah chapter 2, verse 9. And this is talking about the day of the Lord, or the day of God's judgment against the nation of Israel. And just a reference here that says, the mean man boweth down. The mean meaning not angry and that type of mean, but he's of poor means. He has no great income. The humble man bows down, and the great man humbleth himself. Therefore forgive them not. That sounds kind of weird. Don't forgive them, God. In other words, God is going to judge each of these men for their wickedness. They're not going to escape God's judgment because they, you get the picture of the kid that's already gone past the point of repentance, and he's being pulled to the back bedroom for a spanking from his father, and he's screaming along the way, or I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. That sorrow still warrants God's judgment because the crime's been done. But surely the men of low degree are vanity, the men of high degree are a lie, to be laid in the balance. They are together lighter than vanity. Going on to verse 10. Trust not in oppression, and become not vain in robbery. If riches increase, set not your heart upon them. So here we have a wealth, and there's wealth gained by legitimate means, and there's wealth gained by illegitimate means. And there are those who would set their trust in both. I think we've seen in politics a lot of career criminals, if you would, that gain their wealth by illegitimate means, and they put their trust in those things. They think they're secure in that wealth that they've accrued, and then there's others who, yeah, they might work for it hard. They might actually legitimately earn that money, but they still put their trust in it. And either one is a bad thing. Nothing wrong with money, but you can't put your trust in it. Put your trust in God. God hath spoken once, twice have I heard this, that power belongeth unto God. And the way this verse is written is just it's a Hebrew expression, maybe even a Middle Eastern kind of a saying, where you add emphasis to what you're saying by, once it's been said and twice it's been spoken. It's supposed to add emphasis to the point here. Power belongs unto God. That's the point. Power belongs unto God. And I'm so glad it does, because if Satan had all the power, we would be in such a terrible mess. If man had all the power, we would be in a terrible mess. If you or I had all the power, we wouldn't know what to do with it. We'd make a mess of it too. God has the power. And that is such an encouraging thing. Job 33:14. And here's just another example of that use of the poetic emphasis here. A lot of commentaries will call it a Hebraism. Not that that really means anything. But in Job 33:14, it says, "For God speaketh once, yea, twice, yet man perceiveth it not." And just the point there is that God's ways are unknown to man. We can't fully understand the ways of God. He is beyond our understanding and how he works in and through this world, the things of this world, the occurrences, and they're under his direction and power. So power belongs unto God. Also unto thee, O Lord, belongeth mercy. For you render to every man according to his work. So God has power. He has the authority of judgment, but he also has mercy. He has mercy. And that mercy is made possible because of what Christ did. He has paid for sin. He has died for sin on the cross. And so he can show mercy to sinners. And he says, you render to every man according to his work. So God is a righteous judge. He's not going to just arbitrarily assign discipline or judgment, but he's going to judge righteously according to what we do. All right, so any comments from this chapter here, chapter 62? I know it's a little bit tricky jumping in the middle of the chapter when we're going through so fast like this, but hopefully we could kind of see the main thoughts there. Okay. Well, let's go on to chapter 63, and we'll see if we can get a couple verses out of this one before we run out of time. It says, a psalm of David when he was in the wilderness of Judah. So the wilderness of Judah, not really a location that's named such in Samuel that I could recall. A lot of commentators thought it was the wilderness of Ziph that was mentioned at least once in 1 Samuel. And if that's the case, then he would be fleeing from Saul at this time. But he says, O God, thou art my God. Early will I seek thee. My soul thirsteth for thee, my flesh longeth for thee in a dry and thirsty land where no water is. So we can already see the tone of this chapter. And it's a chapter that is David expressing his desire to worship God. It's David desiring a closer relationship with God. And so he starts out with this personal exclamation. O God, you're my God. Early will I seek thee. And this reference to early prayer, early worship, is not something that we should just pass over, because we see that throughout the Bible that people often were rising early to worship God. Even the Lord Jesus would get up early in the morning and he would go and he would pray, or sometimes he would stay at prayer all night. But early will I seek thee. In Isaiah 26, verse 9, we see another similar statement here. Isaiah 26, 9, with my soul have I desired thee in the night. Yea, with my spirit within me will I seek thee early. For when thy judgments are on the earth, the inhabitants of the world will learn righteousness. So, I've desired you in the night. My spirit within me will seek thee early. And my soul thirsts for thee, and my flesh longs for thee. You get those two parts of the human being, heart and soul, or flesh and soul. David is basically saying, my whole being needs you. I can't, my spirit can't thrive apart from you, but neither can my body, my flesh. I need you to actually sustain my life, my physical life. Apart from God's sustaining hand, we would just die. So my soul thirsts for thee, my flesh longs for thee in a dry and thirsty land where there is no water. And there's probably some symbolism here. The dry and thirsty land, it very well could have been a desert where there was no water, but David's probably speaking in a poetic language in keeping with the Psalms here as well. And he's talking, I'm spiritually dry right now. I feel empty inside. I need the Lord to bring that revival. I need the Lord to bring that filling to my soul, to my spirit. And so we should look for that. But on this soul and flesh, turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 6. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 20. and we probably have this passage memorized, but it says, "For you are bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's." Our body and our spirit is God's. And so our mind should be used for things that are glorifying to God, just as our body should be used in a way that's glorifying to God. So what are some of the things that David desires in this search for a relationship with God? Verse 2, "To see thy power and thy glory." Interesting that we just saw that in chapter 62. Let's see, what verse was that? Let me look back here. Verse 7, "God is my salvation and my glory." Okay, we saw glory there, and we saw power. In verse 11, "God has spoken once, twice I've heard this," that power belongs to God. So again, he wants to see your power and your glory. "So as I have seen thee in the sanctuary." God's power and glory. Just in, I guess, a way to kind of reflect on this, how would you describe God's power and glory today? Like, if you're looking to see God's power and glory, where would you look to see that?
Creation.
Okay, good. Yeah, all creation proclaims God's glory. In Romans 1, it says it even declares his eternal power and Godhead, right? In Psalm 19, "The heavens declare the glory of God." Okay, where else what else do we see God's power and his glory?
When God changed lives, he could take somebody's life and change their life.
Okay, yeah. We would call that a testimony, right? And I don't know of a specific example at the moment, but I know there's a few places in the Psalms where David says something like, "I will testify of you among the people," right? What is he going to testify of? Well, look what God's done. Look how he's changed me. So, yeah, that's a good example. Anything else? There you go. Yeah. Looking at his promises and his word that's written thousands of years ago and still remains true today, and these amazing fulfillments that we see. And in fact, kind of in that vein of thought, archaeology, I love to see all the new things they're discovering in Israel and the Middle East. And it's just like every single time they find something new, they're like, "Oh, this confirms the Bible." And no, it's like, well, we could have predicted that was there because the Bible said it was there. But it all goes to show God's power and his glory. Anything else?
Some of the signs he gave to the Israelites as they had won in the flooding the Red Sea, the providing manna, and the things he did for the light to guide him the day and night.
Yeah.
It should have given them awe of his power and glory.
Yeah. So his miracles. And, maybe we can't observe some of the same types of miracles today, but, really, we see God at work in this world too. There's some things that can only be described as miraculous. And it's, God does so much every day that we probably don't even recognize what are the miracles that he's doing. But in the scripture, we see them. And again, I'm not saying this is necessarily a miracle, but just the way God works. You remember a couple of years ago when we had that problem with the roof over here and that big gaping hole where we had a little tiny bit of rain, like a tenth of an inch of rain, and it brought all that water down and ruined the ceiling in the hallway over there. And we were still waiting for that roof to get repaired, and there was this great big storm coming through, and it was a huge band of rain. It was from way down south to way up north, a great big thick band of rain, and it was coming straight for us, going to cross over us. And I remember we texted it out and said, Lord, or just asked everyone to pray that it doesn't rain on the church building, because that would have been disaster up there. And I still have the picture on my phone. When we're in the middle of that storm, there's this little green spot over Henderson. There's no clouds, there's no rain falling over the church, but south of us there was rain, and north of us there was rain, and east of us there was rain, and west of us there was rain. So, little things like that, we can see God working in our lives. And then, of course, the thing that David talked about in your sanctuary. God's presence was in the tabernacle. Like his Shekinah glory was filling that temple. And God, he felt that. He was able to experience that worship in the tabernacle. And so he's longing for that joy, that fellowship with God. And as we close here, I want to look at 1 Corinthians 13:12. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I shall know even as also I am known. Won't that be the great fulfillment of that desire when we see the Lord face to face and come face to face with his power and his glory? So we're going to stop with that. And next time we'll pick up in chapter 63, verse 3, as we'll continue our way through the Psalms. So we are dismissed.